Welcome back again to another episode of Playmakers Alley. We're going to look to talk today about defending the run. Now, defending the run is not particularly difficult, and if the game of ranked football was only the run, like in reality, we wouldn't look to see many big run plays. What makes it difficult defending the run is the different aspects to American football. The fact that you can not only run the ball, but you can pass the ball, and passing the ball is more difficult because there's just more space to deal with, and the fact that they're able to do one or the other makes it a challenge. The body types you might have, both on offense and defense, can make a challenge, so you're mismatching talent. And then also the fact that you can see a variety of different formations from offenses that will require you to have different people who may not be used to playing the run have to now deal with a primary gap and have to do their job sufficiently well and not blow their assignment, so be disciplined in that job in order to help with the run. So those things is what makes defending the run difficult. But if it was just a run game, in reality, what would be expected to be seen, assuming that you have relatively matching talent, is that they may gain between 1 and 3 yards on occasion. But if they're getting a big run, it's because the runner is blowing through somebody and then going through. So whenever you see a big run play, whether that be within Brit ball or higher levels of the game, that is always because someone messed up on their assignment or didn't play a gap. If they haven't had to take on contact or dodge a tackle, miss tackles, they just get clean through, it's because someone messed up on their key assignment in terms of playing their gap, or the gap by scheme wasn't filled, which would just be a deficiency at that point. So what is the primary ways in which we look to defend the run? The main way in which we look to defend the run in American football is an understanding of gap principles. So what's a gap? A gap is any space between two blockers or two players, or between a player and the sideline, so the edge of the playing field. Now in American football, there's always one person who's the ball carrier, and as we know, there are only 11 people on offense and as well as on defense. There are only 11 people on offense, so there's always one ball carrier. There's only 10 possible blockers. The number of gaps that can be created is the number of blockers plus one. So the maximum number of blockers are the maximum number of gaps are 11. Now, the way in which we fit those 11 gaps vary by position on defense, depending on what your priorities are. Now, some players on defense, their priority is to defend the pass. Some players on defense, their priority is to defend the run. Some are a little bit of a mix of both, but they will normally prioritize the run. Now, we'll get into that a little bit later, but essentially, defending the run is a full defensive job. Now, their priorities might change as to whether they run first or pass first, but it's a full defensive job, and the way in which we do that is via defending the gaps, which is the space between two people, or the person and a sideline. Generally, when we're defending the run, or we'll have for example, a standard formation such as doubles that we've gone through. You'll have the QB, a running back, and your O line. In this situation, we would assume that there are only 6 gaps, unless by scout or by information around the offense, we would look to think otherwise. Now, why is that the case? Generally, in Brit ball and often cases, although it's now looking to seem as though it might be shifting, often cases, the QB isn't accounted as a possible runner when it comes to just a standard spread offense or just generally in a run play. Why? Because the QB is extremely pivotal to offenses in their season, and risking the QB, running him consistently, taking on hits, and possibly getting injured could be the difference between you making a championship run and you possibly getting relegated. It's as simple as that. Often everyone will talk about next man up or having having a rotation of QBs or of players, but at the QB position, normally once the backup comes in, your season's done. Your season's done. It's often quite a challenge to come over that. So offenses generally don't risk it unless they've got that's the type of personnel, they've got a QB. So because of that, when we have doubles, we have a 5-man O-line, we have a running back in the backfield, we assume the running back's going to get the ball. So there are 5 players. There are also the 2 receivers out wide, but we're generally thinking of where the run might go internally, because there are gaps out there that will be defended by other players. There are 6 gaps or 6 primary run gaps we're looking to defend. So we'll need to have a person dedicated and assigned to each of those run gaps. Now, what I've looked and just described briefly there is one of the means in which you'll look to defend the run. So gap principles is how the run is generally defended. And in Brit ball and in most teams, you will defend using a one gap principle. So that essentially means you have one person dedicated to playing one gap rather than someone dedicated to playing multiple gaps or dedicated to doing something else. Now there are certain schemes or certain teams that may run a two gap principle where they will have players who are either physically dominant or are quite large or quite strong that they feel they can control the person that they're going up against and manage to play two gaps. There are schemes that do that, and if you're able to do that effectively, that frees up someone else to now do something else. But as a fundamentals, I would start at one gap unless by design of your scheme, unless by design of the personnel you have within your team playing two gap, and then playing a one gap scheme. Playing a one gap scheme, the benefit of that is essentially all your players really in the run game anyway only have to be half as strong, half as good as the offensive line, and generally in most cases, as a stereotypically, the defense are normally more athletic than the offense within the box. Not necessarily outside at wide receiver and at your skill positions, but within the box, generally you might have larger O linemen, but the D linemen are more athletic. So in the cases they're often more athletic than the O line, but you only need to be half as athletic to do the job if you're playing one gap scheme. So we've got one gap scheme, and then you've got two gap scheming. An alternative way people may look to play the run, although I haven't seen it, and so I don't think it's really that advisable for reasons I'll give, is you may look to, rather than looking to play it by gaps, look to play attacking people and then basically being more dominant than the opposite person, and then when you're more dominant than the opposite person, going and making a play on the ball. The challenge with that is that if you're gonna, rather than look to play gaps or flow with your gaps as they move, and you're gonna look to play against people, the issue you're gonna have is that unless you are completely dominant against the person that's trying to block you, and you essentially just destroy the block, shed them completely, and are now able to hunt down the ball carrier will often have a two-way goal, or you won't be able to make a play on the ball carrier because your entire frame is dealing with the blocker. And when your entire frame is dealing with the blocker, you're just letting the running back either have a two-way goal as to which one of the lanes is, or if you manage to press the blocker backwards, he's got to go into the gap that's next to you, but you can't get you can't get and make a play and make a tackle on the ball carrier because of the fact that you're dealing with this person, or you get just one hand out, and these ball carriers are normally extremely athletic, just run through your hand, and then they end up going and hitting their head on the goalpost and scoring a touchdown. But that's really how the run is defended. The run is not a difficult concept to defend. What is difficult about dealing with the run, as I highlighted initially, is the fact that the run is not the only part of the game. You can run and passing just naturally has deficiencies compared to what the run is. You have to deal with a variety of formations where they either have a lot of people packed close to the line or have people spread out. And when they have a lot of people packed close to the line, you often have to bring in people that don't generally deal with the run and have to have a primary gap against the run. And if they're not disciplined or they don't know their key, there can be wide open lanes. So that's what makes dealing with the run difficult. But if it was just a run game, very simple. You have gap principles. Everyone has an assigned gap. If they all were to play their assigned gap, there shouldn't be a situation where someone just busts free and runs for like 10, 12 yards untouched. If that ends up happening, it's because someone's broken through a tackle or flown through a tackle, or has been forced to be blocked, rather than just being the case that it's just a wide open lane. But yeah, that's defending the run. Gap principles. An alternative could be to play the person, play the man, but it's not advisable. And I haven't actually really seen it. And I don't think it would be a smart way to look to play it at all. So yeah, whenever you now look into the Britball game or other games and you see a run going for a large amount of yardage, the first thing you should look to check is, were they gap sound? Who was assigned to each gap? If they did have someone assigned to each gap, was that intentional because they were expecting something else, or was that just by mistake, or did someone mess up on their assignment? But yeah, there you go. That's all we got for today on Playmakers Alley. I'll catch you on the next one. See you soon.